In Myanmar, the ruling military junta is facing its biggest challenge since having seized power in a 2021 coup. An alliance of three Myanmar ethnic minority groups, called the Brotherhood Alliance, has waged coordinated offensive since the 27th of October. The offensive, named by the rebels as Operation 1027, signifying the date on which it began, has made some inroads into the junta-controlled areas in the northern Shan state, the Kayah state, and also in the Rakhine state in the west. Over 100 military outposts have been overrun. Trade routes to neighbouring China have been cut off, and more than 330,000 people have been displaced since the offensive was launched. The Myanmar army so far has failed to mount a serious counter-offensive on the ground and is primarily relying on air and artillery strikes. Almost 200 civilians, including children, have been killed in these clashes. So what's happening in Myanmar at this moment? Our next report gets you the details.
Pauktaw is a principal town of Sitwe district in the Rakhine state of Myanmar, situated 25 kilometers from the state's capital. Pauktaw has become one of the key battlegrounds, with heavy battles being reported from in and around the town. Opening a new front in the offensive, one of Myanmar's ethnic minority groups, the Rakhine Army, moved into Pauktaw on the 15th of November to regain control of the key town with a population of 20,000. The Myanmar military has carried out a sustained offensive involving fighter jets. For the past 2 weeks, military has been shelling Pauktaw from bases around Sitwe. According to the United Nations, 18,000 residents of the Pauktaw town have already fled. The Rakhine Army is one of a dozen armed ethnic minority groups, battling Myanmar's military since independence from Britain in 1948. Last month, it joined forces with the Myanmar National Democratic Alliance Army and the Taang National Liberation Army in an offensive against the junta across northern Shan state bordering China. Increasingly wary of conflicts in northern Myanmar spilling over the shared border, Beijing sent warships of the 44th Fleet to Yangon on the 27th of November, calling it a normal military exchange between the two sides.
This is a normal military exchange between China and Myanmar. Regarding China's position on the conflict in northern Myanmar, we have made clear repeatedly that we are closely following the conflicts in northern Myanmar, and we urge the relevant parties in Myanmar to cease fire as soon as possible, peacefully resolve their differences through dialogue and consultation, avoid escalation of the situation, and take practical and effective measures to ensure security and stability along the China-Myanmar border.
The China-Myanmar border is fraught with drug trafficking and people smuggling, a source of constant irritation for Beijing. China's People's Liberation Army conducted military exercises along its border with Myanmar on the 25th of November. The stated aim of the drills is to test the ability of troops to control and close borders and to strike with firepower should any emergencies arise. Reportedly, Myanmar's ruling junta were apprised about the military exercises. Beijing also urged its citizens to leave northern Myanmar as soon as possible and to stay away from the fighting. Earlier, Beijing had pledged to help resettle people who had crossed its border fleeing clashes in northern Myanmar.
Since the outbreak of fighting in northern Myanmar, some people from the Myanmar side have entered the Chinese side to escape the fighting. Out of humanitarianism and close friendship, the Chinese side has properly resettled the people from the Myanmar side who entered China to avoid the war and made every effort to treat the sick and injured.
Though unrest in Myanmar's border region has been a constant irritant, Beijing nevertheless backed the military junta who grabbed power in February 2021 from an elected government. How long will Beijing stand in Myanmar junta's corner? And what possible implications it might have on the groundswell of opposition backed by armed resistance? Only time will tell if the coordinated offensive proves to be a turning point in the history of Myanmar.